Hello everyone, in this video we're going to talk about how we can take a fraction and write it as a decimal and a percent. So we'll jump right in. We're going to do this by using long division, and then when we get to number 4, I'll show us kind of an alternative way to think about how we could do 7 over 1,000. All right, number 1, we have 3/8. So for 3/8, we are going to use long division. Now, what you could do, and what might be a good idea, would be to memorize the decimals for 1/2 all the way through 1/10. So like what is 1/2 is 50%. 1/3, 33.3 repeating. 1/4, 25%, or 0.25. And then 1/5 would be 0.2. 1/6 is about 16.7, somewhere around there, percent. So 0.167 or somewhere. 1/7 is about 0.14. 1/8 is about 0.125, or is exactly 1.125. 1/9 would be 0.1 repeating, and then obviously 1/10 would be 0.1. So if you'll memorize those, and obviously 1 over 1 is 1, but if you'll memorize those 9 decimals and those 9 percents, then for example on number 1, if we knew that 1/8 was 0.125, we could just multiply that by 3 to get our decimal here. So that is another way to think about it, but for ease of learning this process right now, let's just use long division because we should know how to do that. So remember with long division, sometimes what I've noticed students get confused about, okay, if I draw my long division, like this, what number goes on the outside, what number goes on the inside? We have words for that: quotient, dividend, divisor. I know even dividend and divisor, we get confused about where do they go. And so one thing that I've always thought about when I was teaching lower level math was when we first learned how to divide this, imagine this fraction here is going to fall over, like on its side. So in that case, the 8 would be out here and the 3 would be in there. So just to kind of picture that, it's falling over. And so the numerator is going to go inside the division box there, and the denominator will go on the outside, okay? So if we think about that for all of these, right, it's going to fall over. So this would be 6 on the outside, 5 on the inside, fall over. 3 on the outside, 10 on the inside. And then like I said, number 4, we're going to do that one a little bit differently, so we won't write that as a long division. Okay, so let's go ahead and divide these now. Obviously 8's not going to go into 3, so when this happens, we need to add a decimal and a 0. When we're dividing with a decimal, we're going to move that decimal straight up. And now let's see how many times, we could put a 0 here, but then how many times will 8 go into 30? Well, 8 times 3 is 24. 8 times 4 is 32. So it looks like it's only going to go in 3 times. And now we're going to subtract. 30 minus 24 is 6. And now a decimal is anytime we don't end up with 0 at the bottom when we subtract, we're just going to add a 0 up here, and we're going to bring it down to our remainder down there. Okay, so now we can extend our division there. Now how many times will 8 go into 60? Well, 8 times 5 is 40. 8 times 6 is 48. 8 times 7 is 56, so that's as far as we're going to be able to go there. So 56, we subtract, we're left with 4. Let's add another 0 and bring it down, and now notice our remainder here is 40, and 8 will go into 40 exactly 5 times. So we know this is what we would call a terminating decimal because it ends. So our decimal here would be 0.375, and now as a percent, we can just move that decimal 2 places to the right, so that would be 37.5%. And that would be what 3/8 is equal to, okay? All right, number 2, 5 over 6. So we've already written it as our long division. Once again, we need to add a decimal 0 here in order to divide. And 6 will go into 50. 6 times 7 is 42. 6 times 8 would be 48. Okay, so let's put an 8 right there. So 48. Okay, so now we need to add a 0. 6 will go into 20. 3 times, and that's 18. Okay, but now notice what's happening. We're going to get another 3. This is 18. Okay, 0. This is going to keep going on forever, right? No matter how many times I divide in my answer, it's just going to continue to give me a 3. So we could write this as 0.83 repeating. And notice how I put the repeating bar, the horizontal bar there, only over the 3 and not the 8 in the 3, because that would mean it's 0.838383, but it's not. It's 0.83333333. So that's why we write it like that. And now let's move our decimal twice to the right. So this is going to be 83.3 repeating percent. And that would be our decimal and our percentage for 5/6. okay? All right. Number 3, notice now we have 10 over 3. So there's a couple ways to look at this. We could just go ahead and divide it, 10 divided by 3. Or we could think about writing this as a mixed number. So 9 over 3 would be 3, and we'd have 1/3 left. So it's like 3 and 1/3. So we know our whole number here is going to be 3, and then we just got to figure out our decimal. Well, if we remember from the beginning of this video, I talked about memorizing. 1/3 is 0.3 repeating. So we could think of this as 3.3 repeating. So let's take a look and see what we get. Well, 3 does go into 10 3 times. But now we're going to have to add a 0 to continue to divide. And notice we just keep getting 10 down here. So very similar to what happened on number 2, we're going to get a repeating decimal. Okay? So this is going to be 3.3 repeating as a decimal. And as a percent, we can write this as, move our decimal twice to the right. So 1, 2, if we move this decimal, 1, 2. Okay, so we're going to write 333.3%. Okay, so this one obviously is more than 100% because we have 10 over 3. Notice how on number 1 and number 2, our numerator was smaller than our denominator, so we didn't quite have 1 over 1 or 6 over 6, which would be 100%. So that's why number 1 and number 2, those were decimals that were less than 1 and percentages less than 100. Well, now here for number 3, we have 10 over 3. So we have actually our numerator is more, right? It's more than 3 times our denominator. And so that's why our percent here is over 100%. It's actually more than 3 times that. It's 333.3 repeating percent. Okay? So if we think about extending our decimal there, we would add a 3 there, and then there would be a 3 there. So that's where our 333.3 repeating percent comes in. So let's erase that to clean it up a little bit. And that would be our answers for the decimal and the percent for 10 over 3. All right, now for number 4, let's look at this one a little bit differently. I said that we could use long division, but here we are dividing by 1,000. So if you remember in a previous video when we talked about how to create or how to go from a percent to a decimal, we divided by 100. So we move the decimal twice to the left if we're dividing by 100. Well, if we divide by 1,000, we're just going to move the decimal an extra time to the left, so 3 times to the left. So if I write 7.0 here and I move the decimal 1, 2, 3 times to the left, and we fill in these gaps here with zeros, this would be 0.007. We don't have to write that last ending decimal there of 0. And so that would be our decimal there. And now as a percent, we would move this 1, 2 to the right, so it would be 0.7%. Okay, so let's clean this back up. So now we have our decimal for 7/1000ths, which would be 0.007, and then our percentage would be 0.7%. Okay, so that's how we can take some fractions and write them as decimals and percents.